The heat in the coastal Georgia estate bell was a thick, breathing thing that wrapped around Elias Thorne's neck. It was 1823, and the stagnant air of his mansion smelled perpetually of beeswax, imported tobacco, and the cold, unshakable silence that had become his marriage. His wife, Isabella, moved through the sun-drenched halls like a marble statue given reluctant, temporary life. Elias had acquired Isabella, not courted her, in a transaction of prestige and property, securing the final jewel required for his social ascension in the rigid, humid South Bell. Was the setting, and she the diamond centerpiece designed to reflect his success and cement his authority over the entire county. Yet she offered him only polite indifference, a quiet rebellion that was far more destructive than open defiance. Her silence was a constant, low-grade fever burning through his sense of masculine control, a daily reminder that the one thing he coveted most, her admiration, was the only thing money could not command. This indifference was a gnawing infection in his breast, worse than any fever the summer climate could conjure, consuming the pride that was the true foundation of his house. It forced him to seek refuge in the rigid certainty of his property deeds and the meticulous balance sheets of the plantation's output, things that at least bowed to his will. Elias often visited the ballroom where her official portrait hung, a massive gilt-framed lie of devotion, commissioned from Charleston's finest studio. Her oil-painted expression was fixed over his head, an echo of the way she looked at him across the dinner table every night, judging the depth of the shadow he cast. It was the only way he felt he possessed her, this frozen image of her perfect, unattainable form, a symbol of his achievement that could never abandon him. He spent long minutes cataloging the folds of her silk dress, the specific tint of blue in her eyes, obsessively verifying that this possession remained flawless. One evening, after a dinner untouched by conversation, Elias stood before the painting, a tumbler of brandy sweating in his hand, the ice melting into a dilution of his own simmering frustration. He noticed a faint, almost invisible smudge of charcoal dust near the bottom edge of the frame. It was a detail so minute only his obsessive ownership-driven eye could have caught it, a slight dry streak where the gilt met the canvas. It was foreign, earthy, and utterly wrong, disrupting the polished perfection of his marital testament. He ran a finger over it. The powder was soft, distinct from the house's usual fine dust. The next morning the smudge had become a fixation, an invading worm of doubt burrowing into his meticulous mind. Elias was a man who lived by ledgers and certainty. This tiny imperfection introduced a fracture in the meticulously controlled reality he had built, suggesting that the order of Bell was dissolving around him. He interrogated the house slaves who cleaned the ballroom, demanding to know who had been near the painting. Their denials were immediate, their eyes wide and carefully blank, a practiced opacity that fueled his suspicion rather than calming it. He realized the trespasser had not been one of the house staff. His pacing grew more frantic, his shadow stretching long and distorted on the highly polished cypress floorboards as the morning wore on. He scanned the hallways for any remnant of earth or soot that could lead him to the source, finding only the relentless gleam of brass and the scent of lemon oil. His search led him, not to the main buildings but toward the distant, low-slung structure of the slave quarters, a place he rarely entered, reserving it for the oversight of his cruelest overseer. It was a realm of necessary grime and disorder, where the smudge would not stand out, making its origin all the more damning. The very idea of the smudge originating there filled him with a potent blend of disgust and growing dread, the two most powerful emotions he still possessed: disgust that the purity of his house had been touched by the dirt of the quarters, and dread that the taint might involve her. He strode into the damp, shadowed row of cabins just as the afternoon work shift began, his expensive boots crunching on the packed dirt path, the sudden intrusion silencing the low murmur of voices instantly. The atmosphere changed from tired resignation to rigid fear, all eyes fixed on the master's unexpected presence. He headed for the cabin of Caleb, a quiet man of 20 years, whom he rarely saw but who was known for his steady hands as a carpenter and his occasional knack for carving intricate wooden molds for the confectioner's sugary treats. Elias chose him based only on a dark, terrifying intuition. Caleb's cabin was tiny, hotter, and smelled of wood shavings, sweat, and something faintly acrid like burnt sugar. The cot was nothing but a low wooden frame with a thin straw mattress, and a single rough-hewn chest, clearly his own work, stood in the corner, everything Spartan and hard. Elias stood over the cot, his fine linen coat contrasting violently with the poverty of the space, his shadow swallowing Caleb whole. He ordered the man to step outside and wait, his voice low and grating, granting no explanation, demanding only immediate, unthinking obedience. His heart began to hammer not with blinding rage but with a cold, terrifying clarity of purpose, a certainty that this moment held the truth he could no longer afford to deny. He ran his hand beneath the caught frame, sweeping the dirt floor with his fingertips, searching for nothing in particular, yet knowing exactly what he would find. His fingers brushed against something flat, thin, and carefully wrapped in rough, oil-stained muslin, hidden with the desperate ingenuity of a secret meant to be kept forever. The instant he felt its shape, the blood rushed from Elias's head, confirming the unimaginable depth of the violation. He pulled it out, a drawing board, no, larger than a prayer book, its linen covering providing a false shield of innocuous protection. With a violent shaking movement born of pure certainty, Elias tore the wrapping away, scattering charcoal dust onto the filthy floor. It was charcoal, stark and raw against the thick paper, a medium of poverty and improvisation, and it was Isabella. Not the grand, distant posed portrait of the ballroom he had paid for, but a small, intimate rendering of his wife, caught in a moment of unguarded repose and absolute quietude. Her head was tilted slightly, her hair unbound, falling loosely around her shoulders, and the expression she wore, a soft, knowing smile, half hidden, entirely serene, was a look Elias had never once seen directed at him in the years of their conjugal life. The smile was not for him, but for the one who saw her. The hand that had drawn it had captured not her status or his property, but a glimpse of her soul, a profound and quiet depth that mocked the hollow superficiality of their marriage. This small charcoal artifact, created in secret and hidden in the dirt, was a devastating confession of mutual affection. It was not the theft of the paper or the use of charcoal, likely stolen from the kitchen or his own art closet, that finally snapped the last tether of his sanity. It was the intimacy the artist had achieved, the tenderness in every stroke of the graphite, the shared secret implied by the hidden place of its keeping. This drawing meant connection, preference, and a betrayal that cut across every line of property and class, proving his wife had given her true self to a man Elias owned. The hierarchy of his world had been inverted, the chattel possessed the mistress, and the master was the fool. Elias did not scream or lash out. He did not rush out to beat Caleb or confront Isabella, knowing that neither vengeance would be sufficient to erase the shame. The rage solidified into a single unyielding block of black ice in his chest, turning his blood to a slow, methodical venom. His wife was not merely distant. She was tainted beyond purification. His marriage was not merely cold. It was a lie shared willingly with his chattel. The world he had built, founded on control and ownership, was rotten from the foundation up, and only absolute destruction could cauterize the wound. He returned to the house, gliding past the other servants who carefully avoided his gaze, carrying the small, damning portrait like a religious relic contaminated by heresy. He placed it carefully on his desk beside his heavy brass-bound ledger of assets and debts, the two items representing the total worth and ultimate failure of his life. The cost of this lie, he calculated with the same chilling detachment he applied to cotton futures, was the complete and utter annihilation of everything that bore the Thorn name. Only through a fire that consumed all evidence could the shame be cleansed, and only by including everyone could the secret be truly buried. The afternoon passed in an unnerving quietude, Elias moving through the house with an almost supernatural calm. He spoke with the overseer about the next day's harvest, exchanging pleasantries with Isabella about the temperature, his movements precise and unsettlingly controlled. He was an actor, playing the part of the master one. Last time, before the stage was consumed, the coldness in his heart giving him a terrible focus. He ate dinner, watching Isabella's distant profile, searching for a trace of the charcoal smile, finding none, confirming the absolute secrecy of her betrayal. As twilight bled into a starless night, and the usual noises of the plantation faded into the distance, he moved through the mansion's lower floors. He fetched the large can of whale oil used for preserving leather. Its heavy, rancid scent a brutal overlay to the house's delicate perfumes. He retrieved a heavy tin of turpentine from the painting supply closet, the very stuff used tooth in the oils for Isabella's official portrait, and began his work. He doused the rugs, the heavy, dark velvet curtains, and the thick stacks of financial papers in his study, sparing nothing that held value. He ensured that all the external doors were bolted from the inside, the heavy metal slides scraping loudly against the polished wood in the dead silence. The tall, thin windows were latched tight, creating an inescapable tomb, a perfect pressurized structure for the inferno he planned. He wanted no frantic escapes, no desperate cries, reaching the ears of neighbors miles away, no chance for the secret to breathe its last word. He wanted silent, complete obliteration, a judgment delivered in absolute darkness that would forever be attributed to an accidental tragedy. He checked on his two young children, a boy and a girl, sleeping peacefully in their large canopy beds upstairs, their faces innocent and smooth in the moonlight filtering through the netting. They were of her blood and his shame, and their existence was an unwanted record of his humiliation. To leave them alive would be to leave a remnant of the terrible secret to grow and mock his legacy. They were too young to have been corrupted, but too much his property, too much a part of the Thorn name to be allowed freedom from his final sweeping sentence. He came to Isabella's room last. She was asleep facing away from the door, a silhouette beneath the mosquito netting, utterly unaware of the storm gathering around her. He stood there for a long time, watching her still, cold profile, devoid of the soft, knowing smile he had seen in the charcoal sketch. He saw only the official portrait in her, the distant, untouchable goddess he had bought with his fortunes and his pride. There was no flicker of humanity, no recognition of their shared past or their impending doom, only the cold emptiness that had driven him to this final, ultimate transaction. He didn't touch her. He moved to the corridor, splashing the oil onto the oak banister and the thick woolen runner of the grand staircase, creating a river of fuel leading directly to the upper floor. He wanted the fire to ascend rapidly, carrying the heat and smoke up to the sleeping chambers like a vicious, cleansing breath, allowing no time for thought or repentance. Finally, he returned to the study, where the small charcoal portrait lay next to his ledger, awaiting its reckoning. He struck a sulfur match against the flint of the hearth, the head flaring with a small, sputtering hiss that sounded deafening in the silence. The tiny flame held aloft on the wooden stick was pathetically insufficient for the magnitude of his despair, yet it was enough. He held it to the soaked, yellowed corner of his business accounts, the paper catching instantly, crumbling inward with a hungry, audible sigh. The fire spread with a low, escalating growl across the oil-soaked papers, licking up the wall and consuming the heavy drapes in a single, violent exhale of heat that slammed against Elias's face. He stood transfixed, watching the flames bloom into the rich darkness of the room, a terrible, purifying beauty in the instant of destruction. The smoke was thick and immediate, tearing at his lungs with a punishing finality, but he did not move. He listened for the first sound from upstairs, the first shout of confused terror, but heard only the growing roar of the fire taking hold of the house he had built on a foundation of lies and property. He picked up the small portrait of Isabella, the one that showed her soul, and tossed it into the hungry golden heart of the blaze. It curled, blackened, and vanished in a puff of cinder and ash, the shared secret destroyed. The ledger followed, erasing every transaction, every debt, every name, until nothing remained but the escalating sound of the fire and the awful final heat. When the rafters finally groaned and collapsed, sending a shower of sparks into the dark, silent sky, the Master of Bel was nowhere to be found among the ruins. The fire left only a smoking crater and the chilling absence of an entire family, the truth of Isabella's quiet affection for the slave artist forever entombed beneath the ashes of Elias's absolute, consuming pride.